Hi everyone, welcome to grammar lesson number 4. So in today's lesson, we're going to be covering these 3 topics: pronoun case part 2, punctuation with independent clauses, and 3 ways to fix a comma splice error. So the pronoun case part 1 is actually in lesson number 3, so it might be a little confusing if you jump in now, so I recommend that you go watch part 1 of pronoun case in lesson 3 so you can better understand the second part. So the first thing I'm going to be covering with pronoun case are the relative pronouns who and whom. So when do you use who and when do you use whom? And just to make it a little bit clear, I made every time I used who and whoever in blue and whom and whomever in purple. So use who or whoever if the pronoun in the subject or predicate nominative is in the subordinate clause. And you use whom and whoever if the pronoun is an object in the subordinate clause. So it actually just makes more sense to go through some examples, so I'm going to be going through those now. So in this sentence, Kate knows who is telling her secrets. So the pronoun who is the subject of the verb telling, so this sentence is correct. And then in this sentence, very similar, Joe knows who made those cups. The pronoun who is the subject of the verb made, so this sentence is correct. There's actually another way that I like to remember how to use who and whom, but I'll be going over that after I go over whom. Oh, actually, there's one more thing here. So she is a person who no one trusts is incorrect. It's because here the pronoun is the object of the verb trust, so it should be in the object case. So she is a person whom no one trusts. So just to go over whom and when to use whom specifically, you can replace the word with him or her, then you use whom. If you can replace the word with he or she, then you use whom. So, for example, in the sentence, who is she chasing? You can ask yourself if it makes sense to say she is chasing he, which doesn't make sense. But if you use whom is she chasing, then you ask yourself the sentence, she is chasing, or like, is she chasing him? Sorry, you should rearrange that. But it makes more sense to use him. So because you can replace the word with him or her in this case, then you use whom. So for whoever and whomever, it's pretty similar because when you're choosing between which one to use, you forget about the ever suffix since it doesn't affect the problem or the sentence in this case. So if we're looking at some examples, in the clause, whomever answers the door, the pronoun is the subject of answers the door. So give the check to whomever answers the door. You'd be asking yourself the same thing that we said back in this slide where you can replace, if you can replace the word with him or her, then you can use whom, and whom is the correct one to use. But if you can replace it with he or she, then you can use who. So here, give the check to whomever answers the door. If you say him answers the door, it doesn't make sense. But if you say he answers the door, that makes sense. So that's why you can say give the check to whoever answers the door. So that's why in this sentence, whoever is the right one to use between the two. So with the phrases here, I believe, we hope, they say, those are just some examples, but you shouldn't be misled by interrupting phrases just like the ones I just said. Those are just, again, some examples. Those definitely aren't all the interrupting phrases that you can have in a sentence. So for example, she is a person whom I have been told no one trusts. You can say, I believe, or like, she is a person who no one believes, or she is a person whom they say no one trusts. So the subordinate clause is whom no one trusts, and whom is the object of trust. You can also think of it as she is a person whom, so whom should be able to be replaced with him or her if it's correct. So you can say, if instead of saying she is a person whom no one trusts, you can say no one trusts him. You wouldn't say no one trusts he. So that's why in another rule, I guess you can say, whom is the correct form to use. So here are just some practice sentences with using whomever, whoever, and versus who and whom. So I'm planning to take my chocolate and give it to whomever needs it the most. So I am planning to take my chocolate and give it to whoever needs it the most. So again, we can think about replacing he versus him. So in the first sentence here, where it's incorrect and we didn't change anything yet, I'm planning to give my chocolate and give it to whomever needs it the most. So it would be saying, I would give it to, instead of saying like him, you would say he. So then another example would be Sarah, whom I believed had an amazing memory, forgot to feed her goldfish. It would be who I believed, because who would be he, or in this case, she. So like, I believe she had an amazing memory, not I believe her had an amazing memory. And then this last example sentence is, who do you think will win the competition? It would be, whom do you think will win the competition? Because again, whom is either his or her. So him. So like, who do you think will win the competition? Him. Not who do you think will win the competition? He. So the next topic I want to be covering is the punctuation with independent clauses. So first, when you're working with one sentence that contains two or more independent clauses, each of which could stand alone as a full sentence. So what sort of punctuation do you use? That's the question you're going to be asking yourself when you're facing sentences that have two independent clauses. So first, let's look at the two common errors students make when there are two or more independent clauses in a sentence. So the first common mistake is run-on sentences, and the second one are comma splice errors. So first I'm going to be going over run-on sentences. So what is a run-on sentence? A run-on sentence is a sentence that contains two independent clauses with no conjunctions and no punctuation between them. So it would be, I went to look for my dog, he was gone, I wanted to eat a chicken sandwich, and I wanted to eat a chicken sandwich, I went to the store. Yeah, that kind of explains why these sentences don't work, because they don't really make sense when you read them out loud. I'm going to be going over what the correct form of the sentence is going to be in a later slide after I discuss comma splices. So comma splices are also very common in writing. So what is a comma splice? A comma splice is when a writer tries to splice together two independent clauses with a comma, but a comma is not the right mark for this work. So here, I love that shade of green, comma, I bought the pink curtains. They didn't tell Mike, comma, they thought he already knew. So on the left and right side of the comma, we have two independent clauses, but just joining them with a comma doesn't, one, give the sentence any sense, or two, kind of lead to anything. It's just saying one and two. So because these are two independent clauses, we can't just join them with a comma. So I actually mentioned FANBOYS in my first grammar lesson, but this is another way to use them. So they're actually coordinating conjunctions. So coordinating conjunctions join independent clauses. Punctuate with a comma before the conjunction. You never ever put a comma after a coordinating conjunction. And the 7 coordinating conjunctions can be remembered by FANBOYS. And here are FANBOYS. It's for, and, nor, but, yet, and so. It's pretty simple to remember these 6 if you think of it as the word FANBOYS. So if we're using FANBOYS, I'm taking the sentences that I use for the run-on sentence and the comma splice errors, and I'm actually going to be correcting them here using FANBOYS. So in the sentence, I went to look for my dog, but he was gone. I wanted to eat a chicken sandwich, so I went to the store. They didn't tell Mike, for they thought he already knew. The weather forecast for today is amazing, yet I feel raindrops. So before I go on to explain what's in blue, it just makes sense that we have a comma here and then the FANBOYS. So in this case, I just used the FANBOYS that made the most sense. Of course, you can sometimes change them around, but here it just logically flows with the sentence. So again, like I said before, the comma always comes before the FANBOYS and it never comes after. So I went to look for my dog, comma, but he was gone. So that's why we're going to be following this clause, comma, conjunction, clause kind of equation, you can think of it as. So here the clause is, I went to look for my dog. And then we have the comma, which is right here before the conjunction. And then after the comma, we have the conjunction. In the sentence, it's but. And then we have the clause following that conjunction. So he was gone. So altogether, it's the clause, I went to look for my dog, comma, conjunction, comma, but. And then the other clause, he was gone. And just to reinforce that, I'm going to go over it with, for example, just this third one. So you can say the clause here is, they didn't tell Mike. And then we have comma here, conjunction, which is for in this case, the F in FANBOYS, and then we have the second clause, they thought he already knew. Now, FANBOYS used as coordinating conjunctions can be used when there are 3 independent clauses, or is there an independent clause, and then a dependent clause. I'm going to be going over a little bit more complex sentences a little bit later, but just for now, when you're combining 2 independent clauses in a single sentence, you can use, this is just one of the ways you can use a clause, comma, conjunction clause formula to help you make sense of that sentence. So next with FANBOYS, I'm just going to explain when you use each word in FANBOYS. So here, and is when you're introducing additional fact, or is used for an alternative fact, for is used for cause, nor additional negative fact, but yet opposing contrasting fact, and so as a result. And I just put it here again, just so it really reinforces that there will never ever be a comma after the conjunction. So I'm just going to quickly go back to this previous slide and explain why I use these certain FANBOYS. So here, but, as we defined here, is used for opposing or contrasting fact. So this first part of the sentence is, I went to look for my dog, but the opposing contrasting fact is that he is gone. With so, we have, it's a result. So the second sentence, since it's using so as its coordinating conjunction, it should be showing a result. So I wanted to eat a chicken sandwich, so the result was I went to the store. For the coordinating conjunction for, it's supposed to introduce a cause or lead to a cause. So this first clause is, they didn't tell Mike, and the cause being, they thought he already knew. And lastly, yet is used like but, an opposing contrasting fact. So the weather forecast for today is amazing, but the contrasting fact doesn't make sense that you feel raindrops. So that's just some of the ways to use 4 of these FANBOYS. The rest are pretty self-explanatory. You can just ask yourself if you're confused on which one to use. You can refer to these sort of definitions. It's just telling you when you should be using each coordinating conjunction. So next, you do not punctuate with a comma before a coordinating conjunction if it is joining something less than 2 independent clauses. So the previous sentences that we just looked at, all of those 4 sentences with the chicken sandwich and the dog, so those were all 2 independent clauses. That's why I was emphasizing this clause, comma, conjunction clause. These 2 clauses here are both independent. So this is going to be focusing on independent and dependent. And just to define dependent, I didn't put a definition here, but it's kind of goes along with its name. So independent, it can be stand by itself. So an independent sentence doesn't need anything else, but a dependent clause is a clause that needs to depend on something. So it needs to be with another independent clause, or you have to add words to make it an independent clause so the sentence can stand by itself and still make sense. So usually the case is that dependent clauses, even though they can make sense by themselves, they don't stand by themselves in any piece of writing. You have to have an independent clause or extra words to make the dependent clause make sense and become an independent clause or part of a sentence with another independent clause. Sorry, that was kind of rambling, but it'll make sense once we go through some examples. So just to reiterate, do not punctuate with a comma before a coordinating conjunction if it is joining something less than 2 independent clauses. So these conjunctions also join words, phrases, subordinate clauses, or predicates. So if this is the case where they're joining words, phrases, subordinate clauses, or predicates, you do not have a comma. So just to go for some examples, Larry put on his boots and went for a walk. So we have Larry put on his boots. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be the independent first and then the dependent, but if the dependent clause is first, there are some rules that I'll be also explaining later on. But here we have the independent clause first, Larry put on his boots. If we just imagine that this red pointer is the period of the sentence, Larry put on his boots is an independent clause, and we know that because it makes sense if it stands by itself. So Larry put on his boots. You can, take from that sentence that yes, Larry put on his boots, and that makes sense. And then we have and, which is our coordinating conjunction, went for a walk. So the reason that went for a walk here is the dependent clause of the sentence is because went for a walk does not make sense if you put it by itself. So if you just ignore this independent and this coordinating conjunction and just looked at went for a walk, if you read that in the middle of a paper, it wouldn't make sense. That's why it's a dependent clause. It's depending on an independent clause and this coordinating conjunction to make sense in this sentence. So the next sentence is, the rocket made a loud noise when it launched, but never landed. Again, very similar to what I just explained. The rocket made a loud noise when it launched. If we pretend that my pointer is the period, then that makes sense that this is an independent clause because you know that the rocket made a loud noise when it launched. That is a full thought and it makes sense by itself if we ignore this but never landed. So ignoring this but for now, if we looked at the dependent clause, which is never landed, again, just imagine you see the words never landed in the middle of a paper. It wouldn't make sense because it's a dependent clause and it has to depend on something to make sense. So here we have a coordinating conjunction. Remember, we do not have any commas in any of these three sentences because you do not have a comma if it's joining phrases. Phrases, independent and dependent clauses are phrases. It just depends, again, if it's independent, if it can stand by itself, or if it's dependent, it cannot stand by itself. So this last sentence, both Nina and John need to be more careful. So here, I was using independent and dependent clauses to explain this no comma rule before coordinating conjunctions when you're combining the two. But like I explained here, coordinating conjunctions can also just join words or phrases or subordinate clauses or predicates. So Nina and John, we can look at them as just words. The coordinating conjunction and is just joining the words Nina and John. That's why we do not put a comma. Also, if we put a comma here, it would probably indicate that both Nina is supposed to be an independent clause, which it isn't, so it doesn't make sense to just have it stand by itself. So then you would have both Nina, no comma, and John need to be more careful. Next, I'm going to be talking about semicolons and when to use semicolons. So a semicolon may join independent clauses. So the semicolon tells the reader, quote, there is a connection between these clauses, semicolon, you find it. So just for more examples, there are 10 people on this team, 7 are girls. I dislike that lamp, this one is better. So you may have noticed that, well, both of these, before and after the semicolon, are independent clauses, are full sentences that make sense by themselves. However, you should refrain from using the semicolon in writing, and the reason I say that is because semicolons kind of give your writing a bit of elegance, and it's also less repetitive because a lot of people combine independent clauses or independent and dependent with coordinating conjunctions. When you use a semicolon to combine two independent clauses, there is no need for a coordinating conjunction. So basically, you can think of the semicolon as completely replacing your, it's back here, your comma and coordinating conjunction. So that's why you shouldn't be using them too much, because if you use them too much, it can also get rid of some flow in your paper. When you do have I like shoes and I like this bag, it kind of adds a flow to your sentence. However, semicolons can be used beneficially in your writing. They just shouldn't be used too much. So next, the semicolon joining independent clauses may be followed by a transitional adverb. You may put a comma after the adverb except for the adverbs of time. Also, I meant to also put in here that the semicolon goes before this transitional adverb and then the comma goes after. So it's kind of sandwiched between two different punctuation marks. And I'm going to be showing you guys what the transitional adverbs are after this slide. So the words on the next slide are transitional adverbs. These are not conjunctions and may not by themselves join independent clauses. You use them after the semicolon. So they are very useful in expressing the logical relation of your two clauses. Placing a comma after a transitional adverb, while it isn't mandatory, distinguishes it from ordinary adverbs and sets it off as indicating a turn in the thought. So here is a list. Sorry, it's kind of long, but I'm just going to be going through them. A lot of you guys are probably already familiar with them. It's not so important as to how we group these, but it's important to know when they're supposed to be used. You don't have to memorize that additional facts are so and so and such. You should just know that moreover, besides, furthermore, likewise. Also, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys know when to use these already, but it's just easier to group all of these adverbs in categories. So when you're trying to connect two independent clauses or clauses as an additional fact, you use moreover, besides, furthermore, likewise, and also. For opposing and contrasting, you use however, nevertheless, still, nonetheless, really, in truth, in reality, in fact. These aren't all of the adverbs, but these are some of the most common ones I could think of. And then resulting fact, accordingly, therefore, consequently, hence, as a result, thus, if so, in that case. Alternative fact is otherwise, if not, on the other hand, at the same time. And then for time, to show time, I should have written. It's then, now, later, earlier, once, at present, finally, in the end, at last, next, thereafter, previously. You can say, during dawn, at sunset, whatnot. Example, pretty straightforward, for example or for instance, and for emphasis, you can use the words indeed, truly, surely, and to be sure. So I'm going to go through some examples using these adverbs and how the punctuation should look when you're using them. So in the sentence, Eve dislikes bananas, semicolon, moreover, comma, she dislikes people who like them. So here we have a transitional adverb, and like I said, it's sandwiched between two different punctuation points, the semicolon always before and the comma always after. So Eve dislikes bananas, semicolon, moreover, transitional adverb, comma, she dislikes people who like them. So moreover was in the category of additional fact. So the additional fact here is just like she dislikes people who like bananas. So that's why we can use moreover. We could replace moreover with furthermore, and it would still make sense. Eve dislikes bananas, furthermore, she dislikes people who like them. It doesn't really matter which additional fact word we use because in all these cases, it's just helping introduce the additional fact. So in the sentence, Lily has never taken a computer science class, semicolon, nevertheless, comma, she can code very well. So the word nevertheless was used for opposing and contrasting. So Lily has never taken a computer science class. The contrasting fact is that she can code very well. So I guess it's surprising that she can code well even though she's never taken a computer science class. That's just showing a bit of contrasting facts. So again, semicolon before and comma after, and the transitional adverb is sandwiched between the two. In the sentence, James has to wash the dishes every night, semicolon, otherwise, comma, his brothers will complain. So otherwise was here in alternative fact. So the alternative fact is his brothers will complain. So James has to wash the dishes every night, semicolon, transitional adverb, comma, his brothers will complain. And then lastly, another sentence is Arthur used to be scared of snakes, semicolon, transitional adverb, comma, he has grown fond of them. So now is just to show time. It's one of the many words that we can be using to show time. So Arthur used to be scared of snakes, but now, indicating time, in this now current present time, he has grown fond of them. So we have the semicolon before this transitional adverb that's transitioning to this, by the way, and then we have the comma. So just some things about the word however specifically. So however is sometimes used transitionally, sometimes parenthetically, and sometimes as an essential adverb of extent to which. So in these sentences, it just shows how however can be used in different ways. So it can be used as a transitional adverb here. Tim didn't eat breakfast, semicolon, transitional adverb, however, comma, he does not feel hungry. I think I had however listed here. Did I? Yeah, here. Opposing or contrasting fact. So even though you can think of it like this, even though Tim didn't eat breakfast, he doesn't feel hungry. So however is introducing this opposing contrasting fact. Here we can use however, but not as a transitional adverb. And I know that right from the get-go because there is no semicolon before it, even though it's sandwiched between commas. It's not sandwiched between a semicolon and a comma. So most people love banana bread. Ria, however, dislikes it. And then lastly, Luke can't seem to grasp the material from today's lesson, however hard he tries. So here, sometimes as an essential adverb of extent to which, the extent to which, however hard he tries, that's where however is being used as an extent to which adverb. So now I'm just going to be going over some practice sentences. So this first one, he couldn't focus on his homework, the TV was too loud. So here we have a singular comma. Sorry, there's no such thing as plural commas. We have a one comma connecting the independent clause, he couldn't focus on his homework, and the independent clause, the TV was too loud. Both of these clauses make sense on their own, but it doesn't make sense to combine them with a comma as we explained earlier in the lesson. So the correct sentence would be, he couldn't focus on his homework, semicolon, the TV was too loud. There are other ways to join two independent clauses. Again, you can use the FANBOYS coordinated conjunctions, but it's really up to personal writing preference. Just to show that you can combine sentences, independent clauses, in different ways. For number 2, we have 2 ways. So the sentence which is incorrect, is I really like pizza, I ordered 2. That's actually a run-on sentence. Again, we have 2 independent clauses, but we're not joining them with any punctuation of any sort. Even if we had a comma, it'd still be incorrect. So it can be correct in either of these 2 ways or more, but this is just the 2 that I choose for the word specifically. So I really like pizza, which is the first independent clause, and then we have comma, coordinating conjunction, I ordered 2. So So, as we said, was used to show a result. So the result of him really liking or her really liking pizza is that 2 were ordered. I really like pizza, semicolon, transitional adverb, comma, I ordered 2. It's just showing what's happening because this person really likes pizza. And in the last sentence, I like cats and dogs. Here, it's just going to be I like cats and dogs, no comma. Yes, it's true that this comma and this word and is a coordinating conjunction, but dogs is not an independent clause and it can't stand by itself. So it doesn't make sense to have dogs by itself. So you would have to just say I like cats and dogs with no punctuation whatsoever. And the last topic I want to go over is a little quick tip kind of thing. It's not really a big grammatical topic, but it's just 3 ways to fix a comma splice error. Remember, you can't make a comma splice error when you place a comma between, remember you can make a comma splice error when you place a comma between 2 independent clauses like so. So in this sentence, the ramen was too spicy, she couldn't eat it. Here, it's not obvious what the connection between the 2 clauses, the ramen was too spicy, and this clause, she couldn't eat it, is. So you have to show the connection. So I'm just going to be going over 3 ways that you can connect these 2 to show a connection between these 2 clauses. Also, this is grammatically incorrect. So the first method is to add the right coordinating conjunction. The reason I say right is just one that makes sense. So the ramen was too spicy, comma, coordinating conjunction, so she couldn't eat it. So, like I said before, shows a result. So the result of the ramen being too spicy is that she couldn't eat it. That's why it makes sense to have a comma and a coordinating conjunction. The second method here is to change the comma to a semicolon and add the right transitional adverb. So I gave 3 examples here because there are so many transitional adverbs, so it really is up to, again, the writer's preference on what they want to use. So in this first sentence, the ramen was too spicy, semicolon, transitional adverb, which I use therefore here, therefore, comma, she couldn't eat it. So just so I don't repeat myself throughout all of these 3 sentences, you always have the semicolon and the comma before and after, accordingly to this transitional adverb. So the second sentence, the ramen was too spicy, thus she couldn't eat it. The ramen was too spicy, as a result, she couldn't eat it. All 3 of these transitional adverbs are from the same category. I believe the one that was just showing a result or like what happens. The third method I wanted to talk about is subordinate one clause to the other with the right subordinating conjunction. So here, I actually didn't do anything to the second half of the sentence. I left it as is, but I added the word since to the beginning. So now we have since the ramen was too spicy, comma, she couldn't eat it. So basically when I say subordinate one clause to the other with the right subordinating conjunction, that might be a little bit confusing. Basically what you're doing is just making, well, we didn't have since in the beginning. This sentence, or the clause originally read, the ramen was too spicy. So that is an independent clause. We're basically making it independent. We're basically making it dependent so that it has to depend on this independent clause, she couldn't eat it. So now the sentence reads, since the ramen was too spicy, she couldn't eat it. That doesn't make sense if it stands by itself, so that's why we have to have it depend on she couldn't eat it. So that's why we can just combine these 2, this dependent and this independent, with a comma. So now some practice sentences to go over these comma splice errors. So Julia is hungry, comma, she tries to keep her stomach growling noises quiet. So it makes sense. Here again, there's so many different ways you can combine these sentences, but I just decided to use a comma coordinating conjunction. So Julia is hungry, comma, so she tries to keep her stomach growling noises quiet. The second sentence is Kim is involved in many activities, comma, she is part of the math team. So here I'm using a transitional adverb, for example, to give an example. So Kim is involved in many activities, semicolon, transitional adverb, for example, comma, she is part of the math team. And the last sentence I want to go over is Joseph doesn't like washing dishes. He still does them every day. So here the comma doesn't make sense to add these 2 independent clauses together to make it make sense. So that's why I did this third method, which is subordinate one clause to the other with the right subordinating conjunction. Right, again, it just means that it fits within the context of the sentence and what the sentence is trying to say. So here I'm making, although Joseph doesn't like washing the dishes, he does them every day. So although Joseph doesn't like washing the dishes cannot stand by itself anymore, and it depends on this clause. So although Joseph doesn't like washing the dishes, comma, he still does them every day. So the punctuation didn't change, it was just changing what the clauses were with a subordinating conjunction. So that is all for today's lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed and you learned something new. If you guys have any comments, concerns or feedback, please do leave them in the comments and whatnot. Okay, thank you.